Social Security is going to pay you less than you think. It's going to tax you on money you already paid taxes to earn. And the mathematical rules determining both of those things were written in 1983 by people who assumed you'd probably be dead by now. None of that is opinion. It's all in the official government documents. And the genuinely wild part is that there's a fourth problem nobody talks about. A psychological one that makes all three of the others significantly worse. That's what this video is about. I'm going to walk you through exactly how Social Security has been quietly, legally, structurally set up to cost you money in ways you cannot opt out of, not through scandal, not through conspiracy, but through math, through policy design that stopped being updated 40 years ago, and through the way human psychology interacts with systems that were built by people who were very good at optics and deeply uninterested in long-term arithmetic. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan. And I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data link in the description. Now, the central metaphor I keep coming back to with Social Security is a chain letter. Specifically, a chain letter that got nationalized. You know how a chain letter works. You get a letter saying, send $1 to the person at the top of the list, add your name to the bottom, and when you reach the top, you'll get hundreds of dollars back. It works perfectly as long as the chain never breaks, as long as there are always more new people joining at the bottom than there are people cashing out at the top. The moment recruitment slows down, the moment the demographics shift, the math collapses. The people at the top get paid, everyone else gets a lesson in pyramid arithmetic. Social Security is not exactly a chain letter, but it is exactly a pay-as-you-go system. The money you pay in today doesn't sit in a vault with your name on it. It goes out the door to current retirees this afternoon. Your retirement gets funded by whoever is working 20 or 30 years from now. That's the deal. The deal works, as long as the chain doesn't break. I'm going to keep coming back to the chain letter, because every problem I'm about to describe is, at its root, a chain letter problem. The chain letter's math first. In 1945, there were roughly 42 workers for every one retiree collecting Social Security. 42 links in the chain for every person at the top. By 1960, that number had already dropped to 5 workers per retiree. Today, in 2026, we're at about 2.7 workers per retiree. 2.7 people in the chain for every person cashing out. The Social Security trustees, the government's own actuaries, not some think tank project, that number continuing to fall toward 2.3 by 2035. 2.7 is not zero. The chain hasn't snapped. But here's what nobody explains clearly. The chain doesn't need to break for it to hurt you. It only needs to stretch thin enough that the payout shrinks. And that's already happening, just not where most people are looking. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you how a decision you make on a single Tuesday morning, years before you retire, could cost you well over $100,000. But first, I want to show you the trap that's already eating your benefits even before you collect your first dollar. In 1983, Congress passed legislation making up to 50% of Social Security benefits taxable for higher income retirees. A decade later, in 1993, they raised the ceiling up to 85% of your benefits can now be subject to federal income tax if your combined income crosses certain thresholds. And they set specific dollar amounts for those thresholds. $25,000 a year for single filers, $32,000 for married couples filing jointly. Here is what they did not do. They did not index those thresholds to inflation. So in 1983, $25,000 a year in retirement income was genuinely well-off territory. That represented the top 20% roughly. In 2026, $25,000 a year is not wealthy retiree money. It's somewhere between modest and tight. It's close to what a retiree gets from Social Security alone, plus a small IRA withdrawal. Which means more and more ordinary middle-class retirees are getting hit by a tax that was designed for high earners. Not because they got richer, because the threshold never moved. This is not a coincidence. This is how governments quietly raise taxes without having to vote to raise taxes. They let inflation do the dirty work. It's called bracket creep. The Congressional Budget Office has documented it. The Social Security Administration's own publications acknowledge it. And yet, if you ask most people planning for retirement whether their Social Security benefits will be taxable, you get a long pause and then something like, they tax that? The chain letter has a service fee, and the fee grows every year. Here's the mechanics, because the mechanics matter. The IRS uses something called combined income or provisional income to determine how much of your Social Security is taxable. Combined income equals your adjusted gross income plus any tax-exempt interest. Yes, your municipal bond interest counts plus 50% of your Social Security benefits. If that number lands between $25,000 and $34,000 for a single filer, up to 50% of your benefits become taxable. Above $34,000 and up to 85% of your benefits get added to your taxable income. Think about what that actually means. You paid FICA taxes your entire working life, 12.4% of your wages split between you and your employer. If you were self-employed, you paid all 12.4% yourself, plus the Medicare tax, for a total self-employment tax of 15.3%. You paid in for decades. And then when the benefits come back, you pay income tax on up to 85% of them. Now you might think, okay, I'll manage my withdrawals carefully in retirement to stay below that threshold. That's the right instinct. Except there's a trap inside the trap. A financial planner named William Reichenstein described it as the Tax Torpedo. And the name stuck because it's accurate. Here's what happens. If you have a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, the IRS eventually forces you to take required minimum distributions, RMDs, starting at age 73 under current law. Those RMDs are ordinary income. They add directly to your combined income calculation. They can push your Social Security benefits across the taxable threshold without you doing anything. You didn't pull the trigger. The tax code pulled it for you from underwater. There's a guy, I'll call him Dave. Dave is a composite. He represents probably a dozen conversations I've had with people who reached out after watching videos on this channel. Dave retired at 63. He did the responsible thing his whole career. He saved. He had a traditional 401k worth about $800,000 when he retired. He was proud of that number. It took him 30 years. His financial advisor, who was paid on commission, told him to claim Social Security at 62 to start getting his money back sooner. So Dave did. His Social Security check came in at $1,680 per month. Then, at age 73, the RMDs kicked in on his 401k. Based on his account balance and the IRS Uniform Lifetime Table, his first required minimum distribution was roughly $32,000. Add 50% of his annual Social Security income, that's about $10,080. Combined income, $42,080. That number sits well above the $34,000 threshold. 85% of his Social Security benefits, about $17,000, just got added to his taxable income. The same money he paid FICA taxes on for 3 decades. The chain letter charged Dave twice. Once going in, once coming out. Dave is going to come back later in this video. Because the decision his advisor recommended, claiming at 62 instead of waiting, didn't just affect his monthly check. It affected the Tax Torpedo, it affected his wife's survivor benefit, and it may have cost him somewhere north of $120,000 in cumulative lifetime benefits. I'll show you the math. But first, stay with me, because this next part changes everything about how you think about the timing of your claim. The second thing I want to cover is also the most important single thing in this entire video. And I want to flag that there is a mountain of terrible, incentive, misaligned advice floating around on this topic. It comes from financial advisors who don't get paid to think carefully about this decision. It comes from websites that don't know your specific situation. And it comes from your brother-in-law who claimed at 62 and thinks that was obviously correct because he's been getting checks for 8 years and hasn't done the arithmetic. Here is the basic framework. You can claim Social Security as early as age 62. Your full retirement age, the government's benchmark, is 67 if you were born in 1960 or later. Claim at 62 and your monthly benefit is permanently reduced by 30%. That reduction doesn't expire at 67. It stays with you for life. On the other end, Every year you delay claiming past your full retirement age up to age 70, your benefit grows by 8% per year. 8% guaranteed from the federal government. Not from the stock market, not from a real estate deal, not from an ETF with a clever ticker symbol. 8% per year, risk-free. Let me put actual numbers on this. Say your full retirement age benefit, the amount you'd receive at exactly 67 is $2,400 per month. Claim at 62, $1,680 per month. Claim at 70, $2,976 per month. The difference between those two numbers is $1,296 per month, every month, for the rest of your life. Plus, cost of living adjustments applied to a larger base every single year. If you live to 85, and per the Social Security Administration's own data, life expectancy at 65 in the United States is currently about 84.3 years. You would collect Social Security for 23 years having claimed at 62, and for 15 years having claimed at 70. 23 years at $1,680 per month, approximately $463,000 in nominal terms. 15 years at $2,976 per month, approximately $535,000 in nominal terms. That's a gap of about $72,000 before you account for cost of living adjustments. With adjustments, say, an average of 2% annually, that gap is larger. And it keeps compounding because the higher base number gets adjusted upward by the same percentage as the lower number every year. The distance between those two paths grows over time. Now, the break-even calculation is already forming in your mind, and I want to address it directly. If you claim at 62, you get 8 years of checks before someone who waited until 70 receives their first payment. That's roughly $161,000 in total benefits accumulated during those 8 years. The break even, the point at which the higher monthly benefit from waiting overtakes those 8 years of missed checks, falls around age 80. So the argument for claiming early is, what if I die before 80? Real consideration. I'm not dismissing it. But here's the reversal. You think the risk of dying early is the problem, but actually the risk of living long is the problem. Running out of money at 87 is statistically more likely than dying at 72 for someone who reaches 62 in reasonable health. And if you have a spouse, the stakes double. The Social Security spousal survivor benefit is calculated based on your benefit record. If you claimed early and accepted a 30% permanent reduction, your spouse inherits a permanently reduced survivor benefit when you die. You didn't make a decision about your own retirement in that moment. You made a decision about your spouse's retirement too, and your spouse wasn't in the room. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Let's go back to Dave. He claimed at 62, monthly benefit, $1,680. Had he waited to 70, he'd be receiving $2,976. Over the course of retirement to age 85, factoring in a 2% average annual cost of living adjustment, the cumulative difference in lifetime benefits exceeds $120,000. $120,000. Determined by a single conversation with an advisor who probably spent 4 minutes on the topic because his compensation structure didn't reward spending an hour on it, this is not malice. This is incentives. The financial advice industry has a quiet structural problem here. Financial advisors who charge a percentage of assets under management, which is most of them, have an unconscious interest in you keeping your investment portfolio larger for longer. Claiming Social Security early means slower drawdown from the portfolio. Delaying Social Security requires you to spend down from your portfolio to cover living expenses in the years between retirement and 70. That means a smaller portfolio, which means a smaller fee. I'm not saying advisors are evil. I'm saying they are human. And humans respond to incentives every single time, even when they don't know they're doing it. Now, here's what nobody is actually telling you about the trust fund. And I want to slow down here because this is where people go wrong in both directions. Most people have heard that Social Security is going broke. This headline has appeared so many times since the 90s that it feels like background noise, like a car alarm going off in a parking garage. Technically significant, functionally ignored. But here's the thing. The car alarm is real. The car is actually being broken into right now on a known timeline. The 2024 Social Security Trustees Report official document signed by the Treasury Secretary, the Labor Secretary, and the HHS Secretary projects that the combined old age survivors and disability insurance trust fund will be depleted around 2035. That's roughly 9 years from now. At depletion, the program can only pay benefits from ongoing payroll tax revenues, which, per current projections, covers about 83% of scheduled benefits. 83%. The program doesn't vanish. The checks don't stop. But if you're expecting $2,400 a month, you'd receive closer to $1,992 instead, under current law, with no congressional action. There are about 400 possible ways Congress could intervene before 2035. Raise the payroll tax rate, lift the income cap, adjust the benefit formula, raise the full retirement age again, means test benefits, mix and match. Every single one of those solutions involves somebody taking a loss, workers pay more, high earners pay more, benefits get cut, or people wait longer. Nobody gets more. There is no mathematical scenario where the chain letter fixes itself without someone somewhere in the chain paying a higher price. Here's the income cap situation, because I think it gets criminally underweighted in these discussions. In 2026, you only pay Social Security payroll tax on wages up to $174,900. Every dollar above that, no FICA, which means a portfolio manager at a hedge fund earning $4 million a year stops paying into Social Security before the end of January. They hit the cap in approximately 11 working days. Meanwhile, a registered nurse earning $65,000 a year pays Social Security taxes on every paycheck for 12 months straight. I find this genuinely funny in the way that something can be funny when it's also a bit grim. The chain letter is organized so that the people who can most afford to sustain it contribute the least as a percentage of their total income. And those same people are also the ones least likely to need Social Security in retirement because they have substantial private savings. So the chain depends most heavily on the people who can least afford additional stress on their finances, and the people who could shoulder more of the load hit a ceiling in January. One more chain letter observation, and this one's arithmetic, not editorializing. The demographic trend doesn't reverse on any near-term projection. The baby boomers, the largest generational cohort in American history, started turning 65 in 2011. Every single one of them will be drawing benefits for the next 20 plus years. Generation X is smaller. Millennials are a large generation, but they've had significantly fewer children than the boomers did. There is no cavalry of 42-to-1 worker ratios coming over the hill to rescue this math. The Bridge has a report. The report says 2035, and here's the part that makes this deeply personal, even if you're 35 years old right now. The standard assumption embedded in almost every retirement calculator you've ever used, including the ones from your 401k provider, your bank's website, and whatever app came recommended on a personal finance subreddit, is that you will receive your full projected Social Security benefit. Most of them don't even offer an option to model an 83% scenario, let alone 70%, let alone 0. They assume the chain letter runs flawlessly forever at face value. If your retirement plan assumes full Social Security benefits and you haven't modeled what happens if benefits are cut to 80%, what you have is not a retirement plan. It's a retirement bet, dressed up in spreadsheets. Imagine planning a long road trip. You map the whole route, gas, hotels, timing, the whole thing. Then someone tells you there's a government report saying a specific bridge on your route has known structural issues and a committee has been meeting about it for 40 years without allocating repair funds. A rational person adjusts the route. They don't cancel the trip. They account for the bridge. The bridge is in the report. The report says 2035. Now I want to get into what I actually think is the deepest and most under-discussed problem on this list. It's psychological, not mathematical, which is precisely why almost nobody talks about it in financial media. There's a concept in behavioral economics called anchoring. It's one of the most replicated findings in the field. Kahneman and Tversky documented it extensively. The idea: when you encounter a reference number, even an arbitrary one, it disproportionately shapes your subsequent estimates and decisions. The first number you see becomes the baseline your brain navigates from. And this happens unconsciously. You can know about anchoring and still be anchored. Social Security is one of the most powerful financial anchors in American retirement psychology. And the damage isn't from its existence. It's fine that it exists, but from how people cognitively relate to the number it shows them. Here's the pattern. Someone is 47 years old. They log into the Social Security Administration website, ssa.gov. You can do this right now, and they see their projected monthly benefit at 67. Let's say it shows $2,100 a month. They look at that number. Somewhere in the brain, quietly, without any formal decision being made, that number becomes the baseline, the minimum floor, the thing that, at minimum, retirement looks like. And then that anchor changes how aggressively they save for everything else. Because part of the retirement problem feels implicitly solved. $2,100 a month is already accounted for. The urgency softens. The investment contributions stay flat. The Roth conversion strategy gets deferred to next year when I have more bandwidth. The real estate decision gets pushed back indefinitely. The anchor is not a plan. The anchor is a sedative. A study from Boston College's Center for Retirement Research found that households systematically overestimate how much of their retirement income Social Security will actually cover relative to their real cost of living. Not because they misquote the dollar amount they can read the statement, but because they underestimate what retirement actually costs. Healthcare costs alone are extraordinary. Fidelity's most recent estimate puts out-of-pocket medical expenses for a 65-year-old couple at about $315,000 over the course of retirement, not counting long-term care. $2,100 a month covers a modest apartment in a mid-tier city. It does not cover that apartment plus healthcare, plus groceries, plus transportation, plus occasional travel, plus unexpected expenses, plus inflation. Not in 2026. Definitely not in 2045. There's a woman I'll call Patricia, composite again, based on real situations. She spent 28 years as a high school teacher. She had a state pension plus Social Security coming. Between the two, she figured she was set. She felt set. The anchor worked on her doubly hard because there were two reference numbers in play. She retired at 61, moved somewhere warmer. First 2 years were genuinely good. Then her husband had a cardiac event. Not fatal, but serious. Ongoing. The kind of serious that has a monthly medication line item and eventually a home care line item. Her savings, which she had never been particularly aggressive about building because between the pension and Social Security, it had always felt like enough covered the initial bills. Then they covered the follow-up bills. Then they didn't cover the bills anymore. The anchor told her she was prepared. The anchor was doing math for a world without an unexpected cardiac event. The world had an unexpected cardiac event. I'm not telling you that story to terrify you into paralysis. I'm telling it because the solution is genuinely simpler than the problem sounds. Stop treating Social Security as a foundation. Start treating it as what it actually is. One variable in a system you can actively manage. Here's the two-pile framework I use for thinking about retirement income. Pile 1 is guaranteed income. Social Security, any pension you have. Annuities, if they're in your picture. This pile pays regardless of what markets do. It is the floor. Only the floor. Not the house, not the walls, not the roof. The floor. Pile 2 is investment income. Your 401k, Roth IRA, brokerage accounts, real estate income, any business assets. This pile has variability, but it also has options. You can Roth convert in low-income years to reduce your future tax exposure. You can structure withdrawals to minimize combined income and keep more of your Social Security from triggering the tax torpedo. You have levers. You have control. The people who get into serious trouble are the ones who confuse the floor for the house. They plan primarily around pile 1, treat pile 2 as a bonus, and discover in their mid-70s that the floor is lower than projected and the house was never actually built. Dave, our friend, had the two-pile problem in an interesting way. He had a substantial pile, to $800,000 in his traditional 401k. But he claimed Social Security early, reducing Pile 1 permanently. And because most of his Pile 2 was in a tax-deferred account, the RMDs created the Tax Torpedo that ate into Pile 1 further. Both piles were technically present. The architecture was wrong. It was like building a house where all the load-bearing walls are in the wrong places. The house stands, barely, under normal conditions. But it doesn't take much stress before the structure shows its problems. What Dave should have done, and this isn't hindsight, this is documented, well understood, publicly available retirement planning strategy, is delay Social Security to 70, draw from his 401k during the years between 62 and 70 to cover living expenses, and simultaneously execute Roth conversions on a portion of his traditional 401k every year during that window. This is the Roth conversion ladder combined with Social Security deferral. It accomplishes three things simultaneously. It reduces the future RMD burden, which shrinks the tax torpedo. It fills low tax rate years with income that converts to permanently tax-free. And it maximizes the guaranteed, inflation-adjusted Social Security benefit at 70. All three moves reinforce each other. And almost nobody does this because the instinct is exactly backwards. Drawing from your portfolio to delay Social Security feels like spending your savings. What you're actually doing is buying a guaranteed, inflation-adjusted annuity from the federal government at a price no private insurance carrier can match. Because that's what deferring Social Security is. It's purchasing a larger annuity. And you cannot buy that product on the open market at anything close to the same price. I checked. Annuity rates from major carriers for a 67-year-old male in 2026 to replicate the income increase from delaying Social Security between 67 and 70 would cost somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 in premium, depending on the carrier and the terms. And most commercial annuities don't include inflation adjustment. Social Security's inflation adjustment comes standard. This is where the chain letter metaphor becomes almost poetic. The chain letter has fees. It's underfunded. It taxes you twice if you're not careful. And it's going to cut its payout in 9 years unless politicians find the courage to do something they've been avoiding for 4 decades. But inside all of that, there's still a hidden asset. The delay credits. 8% per year, risk-free, government-backed, with a COLA built in. That's the one thing Social Security does that nothing else does at that price. And most people either don't use it or never knew it existed. Look, to be clear about what I'm saying here and what I'm not saying Social Security is worthless. I'm not saying it's going to collapse. I'm saying it's a component one, variable in a system that requires active management. It was not designed to be sufficient on its own in a world where people routinely live to 87. It was designed in 1935 when average life expectancy at birth was 61.7 years. The program was structured for a world where most participants would contribute for decades and collect for a few years at best. The world changed significantly. The program mostly didn't. The mismatch between the world Social Security was designed for and the world you're actually going to retire into, that's where the money gets lost. Not in a single dramatic moment. In small, compounding, entirely predictable ways. All right, 3 things you can actually do. Not generic, specific to exactly what we covered. First, go to ssa.gov and pull up your projected benefits right now. Not to anchor to the number to do the break-even math. Calculate the difference between your 62 benefit and your 70 benefit. Multiply that monthly difference by the number of months between age 70 and your projected death age. Whatever that number is, compare it to the cumulative benefits you'd collect in the 8 years between 62 and 70. That's the trade-off in plain numbers. Then ask yourself honestly, do you have enough in other accounts to bridge from retirement to 70 without touching Social Security? Second, model the tax torpedo before retirement, not after. Run a projection of what your combined income will look like at 73 when RMDs begin. Add 50% of your projected annual Social Security benefit to your projected RMD amount. If that number crosses $34,000 for a single filer, or $44,000 for married filing jointly, and for most people with a meaningful 401k balance, You need a Roth conversion strategy in the years before RMDs kick in. Every dollar you convert from a traditional 401k to a Roth IRA during a low-income year before 73 is a dollar that won't trigger the torpedo later. The window is real. The window closes. Third, adjust every retirement projection you run to assume Social Security pays out at 83% of the projected amount. Not as catastrophizing, not as pessimism, as baseline financial honesty, because 83% is what the government's own actuaries project under current law with no congressional intervention. That's the official number. That's in the report. If your plan is comfortable at 83%, you have meaningful margin built in. If your plan breaks at 83%, you needed to know that. The chain letter is still running. The envelopes are still going out, but the envelopes are getting thinner. The list of names at the bottom is growing slower than the list of names at the top. And the people who built their entire financial life on the assumption that the chain would run indefinitely at full face value, they're going to have an uncomfortable conversation with their financial reality somewhere in their late 70s. You don't have to be one of them. The math is all public. The reports are all free. The strategies are documented and not complicated. The work is in actually doing it instead of assuming it'll sort itself out. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the laziest thing you can do with Social Security, that's not lazy investing. That's just expensive ignorance with a very long delay before the invoice arrives.